in counseling, also at Palo Alto University, and I was one of the trainers in the Cprt training program with parents, Spanish-speaking parents.
Luis?
Hi, I'm Luis, and I'm a master's in counseling student at PAU. And I actually didn't do the training with the families. My other job is as a Spanish medical interpreter. So it seemed like a natural fit for me to be an interpreter for these classes, since I have the background on both sides.
Thank you both. And Dr. Chen, I'm Dr. Karen Roller. I'm Associate Professor at Palo Alto University and have the great blessing to work with this lovely team and also be clinical coordinator of a site where this training was delivered in the winter quarter.
Well, thank you so much. And before we start, I just want to go over our main learning objectives for this presentation. First of all, we will share with you some key principles of CPRT for caregiver empowerment. Secondly, we will also share some benefits and limitations of facilitating CPRT through online with low resources, Spanish-speaking learners, parents and their children. Lastly, we hope that we will share opportunities and limitations, obstacles to provide CPRT for marginalized families through community partnership. So we would like to give you a little bit background on why we decided to do CPRT online. So Dr. Roller.
Thank you, Darlene. So as any of you working with families through the pandemic are very aware from your own direct experience, it was an incredibly stressful experience, especially for families who have very young children. And so as a team of providers who serves family with young children, when the shelter-in-place orders began, we were looking at opportunities to make sure that service delivery stayed in place. And over time, with the duration of the pandemic, we realized that we needed to find new ways to be able to reach into families that were isolated at home. And for a little bit of background about the opportunity that arose in the community partnership between Palo Alto University and Family Connections, we already had a practicum placement in place. We already had relationships and MOUs and all of the logistical legal protections that would be necessary to extend service into these families. But the reason that our clinical site came into being was because families with young children, especially migrant families that don't have a lot of resources to navigate what is early childhood education in the US, our site actually came into being for families that wouldn't know how to navigate preschool, that didn't want to drop their children off at an all-day preschool and go to work. They wanted to stay with their children. Our site is already an attachment-based early education site. And so the reason it came into being was because these families tend to be quite isolated and don't necessarily have the supports to prepare their children for support, were then enclosed at home. And we know that this is an increased risk for great parental distress, substance abuse, child abuse. Not that our families are any more likely than other families, it's just that what we exist for as a support site was taken away in the shelter in place. And families that were accustomed to coming together in order to share the burden and reduce the isolation of the stressors of early childhood, early parenting, were now back at home. And many of them were losing their jobs. Many of them were dealing with chronic exposure to the virus before the vaccinations were developed because they were not in protected professional positions. They were in frontline service, often manual labor positions where they were continually needing to go out and be exposed and then come back to children that and their families that were very stressed from being locked in all day. And so CPRT was a really perfect service delivery option for us to be able to reach out to these families and provide some of the supports that have been pulled away by not being able to come on site anymore. The main goals we were looking for was to reduce the stressors of the ongoing demand of having to fulfill all the roles as a parent for the child, and enhance bonding while together, reduce the stress, hopefully improve some of the children's behavior, and continue with developmentally necessary resources and supports that our site exists for. This was also an opportunity for us to support our counselors in training in a trauma-informed, multicultural, socially just parental training module. And this was to really enhance and empower the parents to be therapeutic agents in their children's lives. And we also submitted 2 IRBs in order to do 2 different research projects on the outcomes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Roller. And the other thing about this background, a little bit about this CPRT group is we provided a family play therapy class. And that's why Dr. Roller and myself think this will be a great class for our students, all those counselors in training, to facilitate some service learning components embedded in this class. And so the instructor of the family play therapy class herself is a registered play therapist who has tons of experience running CPRT groups herself. So we reached out to her and to see if we can have a partnership for us. And this class, as well as the family connections, and how it also turns out that we were able to reach not only these specific nonprofit agencies, we were able to reach out nationally. We have families from Texas, from other states. I think that's one of the benefits that we will share later, is that accessibility. So if you're not familiar with the CPRT, child-parent relationship therapy is developed by Dr. Gary Lindroth and Sue Bratton. And we were using the second edition. This is a 10-session manualized model. If you are really interested in learning more about this, I highly recommend that. Please read the manual. And there's also a therapist handbook, as well as parent handbook. So it's a 10-session model, and mainly the primary focus is to train parents to become an agent, therapeutic agent to their kids. The trainers, the facilitators, will teach parents mainly how to focus on the relationship piece, child-centered play therapy skills, language, and a little bit child development information for them to have a better understanding of their child's maybe sometimes problem behaviors, as well as how to enhance the attachment between the parent and the child. It is an evidence-based practice, as well as a culturally focused intervention. Tons of research has been done around the effectiveness of CPRT for a specific population we are serving for this project. So one of the example here was done by Dr. Ceballo and Brennan in 2010. Really focused on the low-income immigrants, Latino parents at the time. And the research shows a pretty positive outcome in terms of decreasing children's problem behavior, as well as enhancing parents' relationship. So for our students, when they conduct CPRT, it's a group didactic instruction run in a small groups. The parents also required to facilitate and practice all those skills. Most important thing is the Cprt, child-centered play therapy attitudes with their kids. So the parents are required to record a weekly play based, just 30 minutes playtime once a week. And they have to bring those video sessions back to the group. And our students will provide support, consultation, and supervision just by viewing the videos together. And for our students, they are, because they are in training, so They are also under supervision of the instructor of the family play therapy class. So the unique thing about the online format, we traditionally do a CPRT in person, and because of COVID, Dr. Roller and I decided why don't we just try the online format? Though I have to say, research is really limited out there, the effect of CPRT. However, we consider the accessibility. We want to make sure that we reach more parents during this time. We decide to try through Zoom. So we starting from recruitment, we reach out to Family Connection, the nonprofit, and thankfully, the students in the family play therapy class, most of them are in their practicum stage. So they told me that, can I share this opportunity with our parents on our practicum site? And I say, yeah, of course, we need more parents. That's one of our goals, is to try to reach and hopefully can benefit more parents at that time. So starting from recruitment, we create, normally again, we do consent form in paper, but because of the nature of online format, everything turned out like online forms. So we have Jackie, one of our students, able to translate the consent form into Spanish, so that all the materials in this group are provided in English as well as Spanish. That's one of the things that we want to be not part of the culturally responsive intervention. We are in a quota system. So unfortunately, we are not able to do like just weekly for 10 weeks. We only have 11 weeks. We spend the first couple of weeks doing recruitment. So we actually modify the training format from 10 sessions to 8 sessions. However, I want to emphasize here is we didn't sacrifice any information. We still adapt from the CPRT manuals. However, we were able to reduce the number of the group so that every parent can have more attentions in the smaller group. So each group is about like 4 to 5 parents. Some groups were facilitated by 2 students, and some are facilitated by one student. When I send out the recruitment, I ask them about their language preference. Do they prefer to be part of the English-speaking group or Spanish-speaking group? So I purposefully assign them to the specific group that parents feel comfortable with. So we provide 2 formats. It's either 1 hour twice a week or 2 hours weekly. One thing I also want to highlight is usually when we do this type of training, I would ask students availability first, because I want to make sure that the students can run the groups. But at the same time, for the low resources families, I want to make sure that I ask parents availability first, because a lot of them, their kids they have full-time jobs, their kids are at school. So a lot of time, the only time they can do groups is while kids are at school or on the weekend. So I reach out to parents, ask them about their availabilities. I also ask students to be flexible of their availability. So that's how we match the groups as well as the facilitators. A unique part of the online CPRT group this time was we actually had Luis, who is a professional interpreter. He was able to work with one of our English-speaking counselor in training. So I will let Luis share about his experience working with English-speaking counselor, how to facilitate this CPRT group. We also have 2 groups, Spanish-speaking CITs, and Jackie is one of them. I will also let her share later about her experience. So after doing this 8 weeks modules, we certainly see a lot of opportunities doing CPRT online, as well as obstacles, but we can start from opportunities. So first of all, it's definitely this service learning opportunity. I think we are so grateful that having this class able to partner with us, as well as community agencies able to join this CPRT group. They really help our counselor in trainings enhance their cultural competencies. Through these opportunities, they have a better understanding of what these groups needs. They do have some unique needs, how we can attend those parenting, how to address their unique needs through this group. The other thing is really provide our students practice cultural humility. So I have heard a lot of positive feedback from students from this group. Second thing, reduce barriers to healthcare access and care. I think through online format, we are able to reach out more parents, like I mentioned earlier, not only within the Bay Area in California, we are able to attract parents nationally. We have other agencies, director, for example, reach out to Dr. Roller, ask her more about, oh, can you tell me more about this CPRT group? I think we have a lot of parents are in huge need. They are desperate for this kind of help. So we certainly see this a positive, one of the benefits for to reach out parents who are really in needs during this difficult time. And Jackie?
So this was a service that is really needed and appreciated. The families, the moms I worked with were so thankful that we were offering this. And they said that almost every class, that they were excited to be able to meet with us. They were excited about trying. They were like so trusting, and they were so excited to have this opportunity because many of them didn't even like hear about play therapy. They didn't have access to other classes, and they, at least for families from Family Connections, there was like Dr. Roller said that there was like a gap in the access to being to contacting with other parents, and this gave them an opportunity again to contact to be part of a group, to be with other parents, and also receive this extra training and ideas of things that they could use to relate to their kids, and also specifically to have the play sessions. And it was for us as trainers, it was an opportunity to be creative, to provide the service. So we,
Sorry.
Because it's okay. So because we, because it was online, because there were many blogs that we're going to talk about a little later, about the way the parents were connecting. Sometimes we really had to be creative to make sure that parents had access to the resources they needed. So, for example, okay. So, for example, they were connecting from the phone, so we had to make it. It's not the same when they're connecting from a computer, when they're connecting from the phone. I'm used to taking classes online, but I can see everybody in the group because I have a computer. But when people are connecting from the phone, we need to be creative to make sure that they are access to what they need. So they may not be able to see slides that I present on their phone. And if they're looking at the slides, they may not be able to see other faces. So we really had to be creative to make sure that the parents had what they need. Dr. Roller.
Sure. And so as mentioned before, Family Connections as an agency specifically is funded by some grants to reduce risks of child abuse, and also to enhance parental support around the demands of early childhood. And so what having extra support coming back in during the pandemic did ideally was to be able to keep track of families that might have really needed some more support, weren't necessarily presenting or weren't necessarily asking for help in other ways. We had students who were able to be with these families that maybe otherwise wouldn't have been asking for help. And because of the trust that was built with our students over time, we did have some more needs that were being presented and some families that were willing to participate in individual and family support after the class.
Do you want me to jump in here with talk about my experience? Yeah, so one of the major challenges was considering how to do translation and interpretation. So if I'm just going to assume that folks don't have too much of a background in that. So translation is when we're working with documents. Interpretation is when we're working live, like with conversation. So translating the documents, the survey, getting everything formatted. And what tends to happen with any translation from English to Spanish is that it's usually about 1.5 times longer in Spanish. And so formatting and all of those things, and just making sure that that's available to families. Luckily, Jackie and some of the other Spanish-speaking students, Saribel, jumped in, and we all collaborated on translating things. So that worked out really, really great. Whenever you get to work with another person to help you proofread and things like that, when you're translating, that's such a huge help. And then the other challenge in terms of logistics, because it's so much easier when you get to interpret in person for a room full of people. But interpreting for a group on Zoom poses some interesting logistical challenges, and especially in terms of time. So, we tried to consider, should we try to interpret simultaneously so that as the interpreter, I'm speaking at the same time as the presenter, or should we try to present, consecutively? And so I came up with a system where I would be wearing 2 headphones at the same time and on a phone call with the presenter at the same time that we were in the Zoom. And that's worked for me in other sessions in my professional life as an interpreter. That's worked for me when there's like a room full of English speakers and like one Spanish-speaking parent attending a meeting. So this would be kind of the reverse. And so I thought, okay, maybe we can make this work. And I presented that system to Patty, and she was wonderful. But she also was like, that's not going to work for me. I have like an audio thing, with one of my ears, and wearing 2 headphones is not gonna work. So right away we decided, in this case, we're gonna adapt. We're gonna do consecutive. So she would speak, pause, and then I would interpret, pause, and we made it work that way. It actually worked out really fine. It sounds like it would take like a lot of patience, but I'm used to that. She adapted to it really easily, and the families adapted to it pretty easily as well. So we ended up going with consecutive interpretation for these sessions, and that worked out really well. Also, in terms of role of the interpreter, one of the biggest things was being able to debrief with the person who I was interpreting for was named Patty. So being able to debrief with Patty after the session was huge. Pretty much every session I had notes like, oh, I translated something this way, or I interpreted this as this. Tell me how you feel about this. One of the ones that stands out is the word emoción. In Spanish, the word emoción can mean feeling, or it can mean excitement. So, if in English you say, ask your child about their feeling, then in Spanish that could be interpreted, the person might understand it to mean, ask your child about their excitement, or ask your child about their feeling. So being careful with those kinds of things, and realizing as I was interpreting, like, oh, the parents may have understood that slightly differently. And then having those notes for for Patty after the session. We usually talked for a good 10-15 minutes after every session, saying like, oh, what about, this cultural thing, or what about that cultural thing? And so I think that it was mutually beneficial for me to understand her target, like what she was trying to convey, and for her to understand like cultural context. Just scanning here, seeing if there's something else that I can add there.
Sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah, so maybe if we want to move on to clinical recommendations.
Yeah, it's not a good thing to use a new computer when you do the presentation, so I keep messing up. I apologize, but I think Jackie is about to share other challenges, especially, for example, parents actually join the sessions from like an iPad or a phone. But let me share my screen one more time.
Yeah, I will add also a little bit about the translation. So I was translating the manual, so it was super necessary for me because I can speak both languages, but it's not the same to speak both languages as to be able to translate something like 70 pages from English to Spanish, and make sure that everybody from, like, not just, I'm from Mexico, so not just people from Mexico, but people from other places who speak Spanish that can also understand it. So even though I use a lot of Google Translate and sometimes Word to translate it, and lingui.com, which helps with specific terms and see how other people have translated that before, it was super helpful for me to talk to Luis and ask him, hey, how do you translate this? What have you been doing this in the sessions, like with Patty? And so without that, I don't think it would have made any sense to the way I would have written the manual in Spanish. It was a lot more challenging than I expected, and it was very helpful to be able to talk to somebody else to have extra feedback about how to translate these things. So another one of the challenges we had was the fact that parents were joining from the phone. I should have expected that because this is a population I work with, but for some reason, it never crossed my mind. I just imagine they're taking a class, they're going to be either on a tablet or on a computer, and we would be able to like see each other. And it was a huge challenge. First, because I could see all the parents, but they could not see each other, and they did not know each other. I think there were 2 people who knew each other, everybody else did not. So although I knew their names because I could see the names on the screen, they did not know each other's names. So they would still say, the other woman who just said this, or the person who just mentioned this, but they were not using names. So that was very challenging, and it was something I did not expect. I wanted to show parts of the manual on the screen so they could see things in writing, and eventually I had to make slides with really big font so they could see what they were, the important things that I wanted them to see, but also I could not overuse that because I wanted them to be able to see me. I wanted to be able to see them. And so it was just challenging to figure that out. It was also difficult to role play on screen. The class, there's a lot of role playing in class. So because they are learning skills that they will later use with their kids. So you want them to role play, for example, reflecting feelings. And it's a lot harder when they are also not necessarily used to using the phone to connect on Zoom. Like for me, maybe it's something I do all the time, but for them, it's a lot harder to figure out where to mute, where to unmute. I was not able to use breakout rooms for them to practice, which was also something I was planning to do at the beginning. So it really took a lot of adjusting to what we could actually do when we were using the phone. Also for the sessions, the parents starting on week 3, they start recording they have play sessions with their kids, and they have to videotape the sessions to bring to class so we can all watch them and we can see what they are doing well. We can give them feedback, and they can also like feel proud for what they were able to do and what they are showing other parents. And this was very challenging for several reasons. Many kids did not want to be recorded, which I was shocked because I never expected that the kids would not want, especially because sometimes it's younger kids, like 7-year-olds, and many of them did not want to be videotaped, and we had to be trouble solving around that. And once some of the parents had the videos of their kids, they didn't necessarily know how to share them. So either they could not share from their phone, or sometimes they tried to send them to me, but because the video was very long, it was not going through. We tried to upload it to Google, and they were not necessarily being able to upload things to Google. And one person was able to upload it, and then they could not share it with me. So we had to be very creative to figure out how to play these sessions. And one huge challenge was that because we were in California and we were thinking it will be parents from California, one of the advantages of having this online is that you can reach people from all over the country, all over the world probably, but we were not expecting that. So my first session was, I think it was a Tuesday at 11 a.m. and at 9:30, I received a call from somebody asking me why it's not working. And I'm like, what do you mean? We're supposed to meet like in an hour and a half. And eventually I figured out that this person was in Texas. So, I mean, it's something very small, but it never occurred to me before that, oh, we need to verify which time zone you are in, just to make sure that you know what time you need to connect. So yeah, so these are some of the challenges. Luis, I don't know if you want to add something.
I wanted to address a little bit the concept that, like, just even if you have the perfect translation, if you're using the correct term in Spanish, it might still be really new for parents. It might be something that they're not used to or don't understand, even if it's the right word in Spanish, like, use, the right tools to do the correct translation. Something that really surprised me, and I was so impressed, was how diligent these parents were about doing their homework and reading the chapters that we sent them. And so I distinctly remember that moment in class where Patty, the instructor, started explaining tracking, and she used the word tracking, and I thought, oh, okay, here we go. And so I kind of paused for a minute, and I was like, well, la palabra en inglés, like I started kind of explaining a minute, and one of the parents was like, oh, seguimiento. And I was like, great, yeah. And she's like, oh no, I read the chapter. And I was like, I was so impressed and so surprised that, it was this nice moment, because that is a challenge. Those kind of things are challenges. But if you give the parents the tools, they were so enthusiastic that, they were given the tool. And then I was like, okay, seguimiento, everybody read the chapter and the words. So cool, like, we'll keep going.
And one thing I want to mention, the audience probably wondering, like, why don't we have a Spanish version of a CPRT? I just want to mention, yes, there is. However, currently we only have the Spanish manual for the first edition. But for this class, they are doing the second edition of CPRT. They modify a little bit information in the second edition. But just this year, they are still working, because I did reach out to the publisher and the authors, and they are still working on the Spanish version. So hopefully when maybe any of you who is interested in doing Spanish speaking CPRT training, and hopefully by the time you will have a Spanish version ready for you. But I just so appreciate, like, this year, our students, especially Jackie, like, she literally the only one, and she worked with other students and try to get all the translation ready right before the class for the parents. Okay, so since this is really our very first time in doing CPRT online, we have so many lessons learned, and we just want to share, if any of you are considering doing CPRT with this population, and especially online, we do have a list of clinical recommendations for you to consider. First of all, I wanted to say that when thinking about partnership with the communities, I think need to reach out to them in advance. It certainly took a little bit longer than Dr. Roller and my anticipation to recruit the parents, get the groups done, and that's why we actually kind of delay our timeline for our students to start their CPRT group. So that would be one of our recommendations if you're thinking about partnership with any community agencies or even schools, you probably want to start that conversation in months in advance. And even like thinking about recruitment months in advance, that would be one of our recommendations. The other thing I actually again didn't cross on my mind, and that's my biggest learning, is though I ran a CPRT group many times myself, and however just never thought about, I want to make sure that even the online consent form is translated in their preferred language as well. So again, if you're thinking about not only Spanish speaking families, maybe other bilingual parents, we always have to think about what their preferred language is and how we can really provide the linguistic sensitive intervention. So again, like I can't agree more like what Jackie said. A lot of this is a really small thing, but really didn't come through my mind until actually Jackie reached out to me and asked, do we need to translate online consent form in Spanish as well? I said, oh my goodness, yes, please. Thank you so much for doing that. All right.
Yeah, so another thing is that because we want them to be able to sign it, we were sending them like a paper copy, an online copy of a paper consent form. Like it was virtual, but it was a document they had to print and somehow scan and send back. And many of these parents don't know how to sign it online, and they don't have access to printers. So really being able to do it online so they can sign online without going through so much struggle is super important.
Yes, because when you read the CPRT manual, they really just say, oh, make sure parents bring the consent form in the first session, the consent form in paper. That the manual didn't detail like what to do if you're thinking about doing CPRT online, right? So thank you so much for sharing that piece of information, Jackie. And Jackie, would you like to share also the paper copy of manual?
Yeah, so exactly because we don't know what parents are going to have access to, I was emailing them parts of the parent manual ahead of time, but they really, I think something that would have been very helpful for them is if I had their like physical address, their mailing address, and I could just print it and send it to them so they could see it on paper instead of having to figure out how they can see on their phone parts of the information from the manual when they're trying to at the same time take the class. I think it would have been helpful for them to have a printed copy where they can take notes. There was one mom in my class who had access to a printer and was able to do that, but everybody else didn't have access to the manual during the class. So just making that available for them, it seems something very small, but I think it would be very important for parents. Also, we are used to communicating through email, but the reality is that many parents prefer to communicate through texts and often through WhatsApp. And the best way we found to be able to share their videos in class was for them to send them to me through WhatsApp, and then I would play them, which became also like an issue of we have to make sure that they know the risk of sending the video through WhatsApp, and I have to delete the video afterwards. So there are like small things again, but this is one of the creative ways we had to, this is one of the things that we had to find creative ways to solve, just being able to show the videos that they were making. Also, because they have limited resources, they don't necessarily have access to all the toys that other parents may have access to. So we really had to take a big chunk of one class to figure out what are alternative toys that they can use. For example, making toys in the sense that if they don't have dolls, maybe they can make them with paper. They can involve their kids to make them. They can use, I don't know, if they don't have swords, maybe they can make a sword. So I think we have to be, in general, more flexible with this population about how to figure out what toys they can use and how they can find the appropriate toys, because it's important that they have at least toys from each of the categories.
Can I jump in a little bit right here? So if you, for example, if you work in the community agencies or in the setting where you are able to supply those toys for families, I think that will be great. During COVID, I know a lot of therapists that actually will deliver, they will pack the toys from different categories because CPRT do require a couple of toys from different categories. So a therapist would pack the toys in one bag and just deliver to parents who are participating in Cprt, so that parents wouldn't be too worried or overwhelmed by like, oh my goodness, where can I find those toys ready for the playtime with my child. So that's just another recommendations.
Yeah, so another thing that I mentioned before was making slides is useful, because then, especially for visual people, they can see it in writing. They have to be slides with very little information, so they can see it from the phone, and we had to minimize the use of slides, but slides were very helpful also because I could send them the slides and they had like a review or a summary of what they are seeing in the manual. So slides is something that I would recommend. So because we're using, or they are using phones, it's hard for them to interact with each other, and it's hard for them to know each other's names. So I think in the future, if I were facilitating this training again, I would make sure that I pay even more attention to how the parents are interacting with each other, making sure that when they're going to respond to each other, I repeat the name so that they begin to know each other. And also, I think Luis is going to add something about this. Yeah.
There were some maybe cultural considerations around those kinds of interactions. The one that comes to mind is as parents kind of trickled in later into the class. So in a Spanish-speaking group, as people come in, lateness is treated a little bit differently. And so what's prioritized is everyone having a chance to introduce themselves and say hello to everyone else in the, say hello to everyone else in the group. So as people come in, acknowledging them and saying, hello, this is where we are, that's kind of, it has that cultural sort of flavor to it. Different people handle things differently. So when the person I was interpreting for, just kind of kept to her script and kept going, I noticed that, and then we talked about it after. And so that was such a great thing to be able to have that time set aside to debrief after the meetings and just go over. In our case, I wasn't taking the class and I wasn't an instructor, but I am a counseling student. So we got a little bit of both to be able to talk to each other about like counseling type things, and then also cultural type things and interpretation and more granular things about translation and word choice and things like that. Yes,
And one more
interpreter is
thing,
cultural broker. Yes, thank you, Karen. That's such a good point. And I think that one of the things that really hit home for me as we were working together was that there really was like it was like a training in how to work with an interpreter. So really, especially when you get to work with an interpreter one-on-one with the same families again and again, when you have that continuity of care, when you have that kind of same experience again and again, you really get that sense of like rhythm and what kinds of questions you can ask, and when to pause, how much space to give the interpreter, and so towards the end, in our last few sessions, we really had a rhythm going. And also Patty was really great and sensitive about asking, like, oh, what about this? What could I do better? What would you recommend? I got the sense that this was going on. What was your sense? And so as an interpreter, there are a lot of things that even when I'm doing a great job interpreting words, there are some things that don't come across, right? And so sometimes the hardest thing for me to convey are like when people make grammatical errors, or the sort of the feeling that I guess is probably behind what they were saying. And so being able to debrief with that after and check in with each other and explain those things was invaluable.
Yeah, and to that, I did not have a co-leader. There were groups that had co-leaders, but because there were so many Spanish speakers, the groups that were in Spanish only had one leader. So I did not have a co-leader. And when I was listening to Luis and how he was able to debrief with the leader of the class, I kind of felt like I really needed that too, just to have somebody else who knew what was happening, and we could figure out if there's something missing, and is there something that they saw that I didn't see. And sometimes like one person can take the lead, but the other person can make sure that parents are understanding everything. They can acknowledge parents as they come in. So there are different things that if you have somebody else in the room and then also being able to debrief afterwards, I think would be very helpful. And one other thing that I want to share is that when sometimes parents have to miss classes just because either they don't have childcare at that time or for whatever reason. And one of the things that the slides helped for was, once I had the slides during one session, two parents were absent, so I was able to record like a short video with the slides of what we went through in the class, so they could watch it before the following class. So they didn't feel lost the following class. When they came back, they knew what happened before, and they knew that I was thinking about them, that they were welcome to come back. And I think that was very helpful.
One more thing, something that's not on the slide, but it is coming up for me now as I'm thinking about it, is when everything that gets said in class is repeated, it's said twice, the amount of time that goes into that, So if you're going to have translation instead of a Spanish speaking presenter, if you're going to have translation, it would be good to consider adding extra time. We really lucked out in our group because we were able to kind of flex our time, as other things were modified. And, like when we realized the kids didn't want to be videotaped, and then, we kind of were able to kind of gain some time here and there. And so we were able to fit things in the format. But if you're going to use translation, maybe consider making it, an extra, giving yourself that extra like 15 minutes or extra maybe 20 minutes.
So being said, I think our biggest lesson learned is we need to be as flexible as possible. I think we will encounter some technology issues, or for example, parents missing the class, the group, and how we really provide a culturally sensitive environment for parents. So I think being flexible at the same time, really empower parents and encourage them to know that a lot of time is more than just learning this child-centered play therapy and skills. Instead is really focus on that attachment, the connection between the parent and the child. And that's the beauty of the CPRT. And that's our last clinical recommendations here. And let me see, I want to make sure that we have some time toward the end for our Q&A. Here, just want to highlight that it's actually we not only providing this CPRT training, there is another research underway. We actually wanted to interview parents' experience participating in CPRT online. We also actually doing another research is interviewing our students. What about their experience conducting CPRT online? So hopefully we'll get this research done one day and get it published and can share the outcome with everyone here. All right. So we do have about like 5 minutes. So we would like to take any questions here from everyone. I think I missed some really nice chat earlier. And I want to say, Dr. Lopez, thank you so much for sharing that. I was, me personally, really fortunate, went to UNT and trained by those two masters and doing CPRT. And I wanted to say that that's one of the things when I moved to California, I was really surprised that play therapy or CPRT is not a huge thing in California. And that's part of my passion now is want to make sure that I train more our students. Jackie is one of them. She'll be a great play therapist in the future. So it's again like how to share all those CCPT and CPRT and can benefit all more parents in the community. Any questions or feedback for us? If you are interested in learning more about CPRT, like I said, there's a manual out there, but it's also important that it does require specific knowledge and skills, especially the foundation of the basic play and child-centered play therapy. So there's training out there. I think Dr. Lopez shared a website earlier. I think that's a great place to start. And at the same time, it doesn't mean that you have to be a registered play therapist to run CPRT. All mental health professionals are qualified to facilitate CPRT as long as you have those knowledge and skills in training. Yes. Any questions? Or our presenters, do you have other thing you would like to share?
I will just say that I kept getting emails and requests while the course was going on as word of mouth was traveling out through people's support networks. So be prepared to come up with a schedule because you'll realize how much unmet need there is as folks start talking to their beloveds in their communities. And we don't want to let them down by saying that we don't know when it'll happen again. So if it can be something that's scheduled annually in your training programs or at your sites, that would be amazing. And that way families can know how to plan around it. And that will also help with recruitment in order to have these language concordant groups. So it would be amazing to have monolingual Spanish speakers, bilingual learning, SEB Spanish speakers, and other groups that are at different levels of fluency, so that they could all practice their skills. That is something we have in with our Family Connections client body, and it would be something that would be amazing to have at other sites too, that as folks get more bilingual, that they can have a safe opportunity to practice with peers that they feel.
Yeah, I'll just add that I had a similar experience. The need is, and the enthusiasm is really out there. So I work at a different site. You know, my internship is in a different context, but I also work with Spanish-speaking parents, and I've had a lot of parents ask about something like this, and it was like, oh yeah, it exists. So yeah, there's a lot of enthusiasm out there for this.
Well, again, thank you so much.
Specifically for, oh, sorry.
Go ahead,
For
please.
Spanish-speaking migrant families, just the empowerment component of not having to depend on professionals to give you a window in to your child long-term is such a leg up in so many ways. So I love the model, and I think that this is a really nice fit for families that are wanting to be able to own what's happening in their family development.
Absolutely. Well, I'm aware of the time. I want to say thank you all again for attending our session, and hopefully there's some takeaway for you all, and you can consider facilitating CPRT with your community. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference and have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael.
You're very
Thanks
welcome.
to my lovely team,
I'll stop
Thank
the
you,
recording.
team.
award-winning students.